This $0 method keeps carrots, turnips, and beets fresh for 6 months without electricity. A wooden box, damp sand, the right temperature. Farmers used it for 2,000 years. The refrigerator replaced it in 1 generation. Why did we stop? If you go back just a few decades, almost every farmhouse in America had one. A wooden box or barrel in the root cellar packed with slightly damp sand, filled with the autumn harvest. Carrots buried in layers, turnips packed in rows. Beets stored whole with the greens trimmed, parsnips, celeriac, kohlrabi, rutabaga, all of them preserved through winter, in nothing more than a container of sand kept in a cool, dark space. By March, when the ground outside was still frozen solid and the garden had been bare for 5 months, those vegetables were still firm, still sweet, still entirely edible. This was not a regional trick or a local custom. It was practiced across North America, across Northern and Central Europe, across Russia. Across every agricultural society that produced root vegetables and faced winters cold enough to freeze the ground, the method predates canning, predates pickling in most forms, predates almost every food preservation technique most people know about today. Archaeological evidence of root cellars. The underground, spaces designed specifically to maintain the conditions sand storage requires, has been found at settlement sites going back thousands of years. Keeping roots in sand through winter was not something a specific culture invented. It was something every culture that grew carrots independently discovered, because the carrots told them how. Leave a carrot in the ground too long and it survives winter better than you expected. Bury it in damp soil in a cool space and it survives even longer. Replace the soil with sand and it survives perfectly. Today, if you walk through any modern home in the country, you will struggle to find a single one of these boxes. The knowledge of how to build one, how to pack one, and why it works so reliably has largely disappeared from mainstream awareness in the space of 2 or 3 generations. The refrigerator arrived, the root cellar fell out of fashion, and a method that fed families through winters for longer than most recorded history simply stopped being taught. But the method still works. The science behind it has not changed, and the cost of doing it remains exactly what it has always been. Nothing. The reason sand storage works comes down to 3 conditions that roots and tubers need to survive long-term storage: consistent cool temperature, moderate humidity, and the absence of the ethylene gas that triggers ripening and decay. A refrigerator addresses the first tolerably well. It fails on the third. The sealed environment of a modern refrigerator concentrates ethylene gas from fruits and other vegetables, accelerating the softening and decay of anything stored nearby. Carrots stored in a refrigerator with apples will go limp and bitter within weeks, because apples are among the highest ethylene producers of any common food. In sand, the same carrots hold their firmness and sweetness for months. The sand itself does something simple but important. It maintains even humidity around the surface of each vegetable. A root vegetable left in open air loses moisture through its skin and shrivels within days. Packed in damp sand, the moisture gradient between the vegetable's surface and the surrounding material stays nearly flat. The vegetable cannot lose moisture because the sand is already slightly moist. It cannot gain too much moisture because the sand is not wet. The balance keeps the skin intact, the interior firm, and the sugars stable at exactly the level they were at harvest. Here is the number that makes this concrete. A carrot at harvest is roughly 90% water by weight. That water is bound in the cell walls of the carrot tissue, held under a small amount of pressure that makes the carrot firm when you bite it. When a carrot loses 2% of its body weight in moisture, the cell pressure drops enough that you can feel the difference. The carrot bends instead of snapping. When it loses 5%, it is visibly limp and noticeably less sweet because the sugar concentration has changed with the loss of water. Sand storage holds that moisture loss to a fraction of 1% per week. Open-air refrigerator storage loses it in days. A plastic bag slows the loss but concentrates the ethylene that accelerates decay through a different mechanism. Independent tests of traditional root vegetable storage methods have consistently found that sand storage at the right temperature preserves carrots, beets, and turnips for 4 to 6 months with minimal quality loss. The right temperature is between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. A basement or garage in most climates maintains this range through winter naturally, without refrigeration, without any energy input, without any cost, Here is where modern food storage falls apart completely. The average American household spends roughly $150 a year running a refrigerator. That refrigerator holds carrots packed in a plastic bag in a crisper drawer designed to maintain humidity, which it does imperfectly at best. Those carrots typically last 2 to 4 weeks before they begin to soften and lose their flavor. Then they are thrown away and replaced with a fresh bag from the store. The USDA estimates that American households throw away between 30 and 40% of the food they purchase. A significant portion of that waste is root vegetables that went soft in the crisper before anyone used them. This is not negligence. It is the natural outcome of a storage method that simply cannot hold these vegetables for the duration of the season. The sandbox requires one trip to the farm or farmer's market in October, one harvest of carrots stored once, no return trip until spring, no packaging, no transportation chain, no ongoing energy cost, no weekly decision about whether the carrots are still good enough to use. Now consider what the food industry actually built around the refrigerator. Commercial cold storage facilities, refrigerated trucks, refrigerated display cases in grocery stores, cold chain logistics, connecting farms to warehouses to stores to the refrigerator in your kitchen. Every link in that chain costs money, consumes energy, and employs people whose livelihoods depend on the food moving through the chain regularly. A family that packs their own root vegetables in sand in October and does not buy carrots again until April is a family that has stepped out of that chain entirely for 6 months. They are not buying packaging. They are not paying for refrigerated transportation. They are not contributing to the cold storage energy bill. They are just not participating. The appliance industry arrived in the 20th century with a compelling promise. Cold storage at home, available year-round, flexible enough to hold any food in any quantity on demand. That promise was genuine, and the product delivered on it. But the arrival of the refrigerator as a universal kitchen appliance did not make sand storage obsolete. It made sand storage invisible. There was no commercial interest in teaching consumers about a storage method that required no purchase, no appliance, no replacement parts, and no monthly electricity cost to operate. The refrigerator manufacturers sold refrigerators. The food industry built cold chains to supply them year-round. And the knowledge of what worked before refrigerators existed, the knowledge that kept rural families fed through every winter for 2,000 years, quietly faded from mainstream awareness with no one to advocate for it. Your great-grandmother knew how to pack a sandbox. Her mother knew. Every woman who managed a farmhouse through a pre-refrigerator winter in North America or Europe knew, because knowing it was simply part of knowing how to run a household. The knowledge gap opened in the generation that grew up with refrigerators and inherited the assumption that the refrigerator was the only correct answer to the question of how food is kept through winter. Here is exactly how to do it, and it requires almost nothing you do not already own. Start with a wooden box, a plastic storage bin, or any container large enough to hold your harvest. Wooden boxers breathe better than plastic and are slightly preferable. But plastic works adequately if you leave the lid slightly open to prevent moisture buildup. The container should be large enough that you can pack vegetables in layers with at least 2 inches of sand between each layer and 2 inches of sand above and below. A standard wooden wine crate holds enough carrots for a family of 4 for 2 months. A 30-gallon plastic bin holds enough for 5 or 6 months. For a larger harvest, use multiple containers rather than overpacking a single one. The sand needs to be slightly damp, not wet, not dry. The standard test is to squeeze a handful. It should hold its shape when you release it, but not release any water. If water drips from a squeezed handful, it is too wet and will promote mold. If it crumbles immediately, it is too dry and will allow the vegetables to desiccate. This is the most important variable to get right, and the most common point where people fail on their first attempt. Aim for sand that feels like it has been rained on and then left to sit for an hour. Garden sand, builder sand, or any clean sand without added chemicals works correctly. Avoid beach sand if it is salted, as salt will draw moisture out of the vegetables rather than maintaining it. Prepare the vegetables before packing. Trim the greens of carrots, beets, and turnips down to about 1 inch above the root, leaving enough to prevent the crown from drying out, but removing the leafy growth that would continue to draw moisture from the stored root. Do not wash the vegetables before storing. Soil left on the skin creates a natural protective barrier. Washing removes this barrier, and introduces moisture that can promote mold at the contact points between the vegetables. Inspect each vegetable before packing and discard any that show cuts, bruising, or soft spots. A single damaged vegetable left in the container will decay faster than the others and accelerate the decay of everything touching it. Lay 2 inches of damp sand on the bottom of the container. Place your first layer of vegetables in a single layer with none touching each other and none touching the sides of the container. The no-touching rule is the most important packing detail. If 2 vegetables are in contact and one of them develops even the beginning of decay, the contact point transfers that decay immediately. An inch of sand between each vegetable eliminates this pathway entirely. Cover with 2 more inches of sand. Repeat until the container is full or your harvest is packed. Finish with a layer of sand on top. Put the container in your coolest available space. The ideal location is anywhere that holds consistently between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit without freezing. A basement in most parts of the country maintains this range through winter without any intervention. An unheated garage works in mild climates. A cold closet on an exterior wall works in colder climates. If you live somewhere without a basement and with a warm winter climate, the coolest corner of an interior room combined with slightly drier sand and a slightly reduced storage duration will still extend your root vegetable life dramatically beyond what a refrigerator delivers. Check the sand every 3 to 4 weeks. If it feels completely dry when you squeeze a handful, mist the surface lightly with water, mix the top layer gently, and check again in a week. If it smells sour or fermented, or if you see any mold on the surface, pull out all the vegetables, discard any that are soft, wash and dry the others, and repack in fresh sand with slightly less moisture. Pull and taste a vegetable from the middle of the container at your first check. This tells you more accurately than anything else how the storage is going. If it tastes the same as it did in October, the system is working. Different vegetables have slightly different optimal conditions worth knowing. Carrots store best at the coldest end of the acceptable range, as close to 32 degrees as possible without actually freezing. They are the most moisture-sensitive of the common storage vegetables and benefit from the most careful sand preparation. Beets tolerate slightly warmer temperatures and benefit from having a small amount of their tops left attached. An inch or 2 of stem keeps the crown from drying out in a way that trimming flush does not. Turnips and rutabagas are the most forgiving of the common storage vegetables and will tolerate temperature fluctuations better than either carrots or beets. Parsnips actually improve in flavor during storage, converting their starches to sugars over the months in the box, and are often dramatically sweeter in February than they were in October when you packed them. Some traditional gardeners call this sweetening and consider October harvested parsnips stored through December to be the peak of the year's flavor. One honest note before you build yours: sand storage works reliably for root vegetables. It is not effective for all vegetables: tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, leafy greens. And most fruiting vegetables do not store well in sand and should not be treated this way. The method is specific to roots and tubers, the same category of vegetables that root cellars were traditionally used to preserve, and works precisely because these plants evolved to survive winter underground. In cool, moist, dark conditions that sand storage closely replicates, every other vegetable category has its own preservation methods: fermentation for cabbage, freezing for peas and beans, canning for tomatoes. And sand is not a substitute for those. It is the right tool for roots and a useless tool for everything else. One more thing worth knowing: sand storage does not require a perfect setup to be useful. The conditions do not need to be ideal for the method to dramatically extend your storage life compared to the refrigerator. If you have a slightly warmer basement than ideal, your carrots may last for months instead of 6. That is still twice as long as the refrigerator and requires 0 electricity. If your sand is slightly drier than ideal, the outer layer of your carrots may shrivel a little while the interior stays perfect. Peel the outer layer when you cook them. The carrot inside is fine. Traditional methods were practiced by people who did not have controlled conditions, who did not have thermometers calibrated to 2 degrees, who packed their boxes by feel and checked them by taste and managed winter food supplies across entire families. The method is forgiving because it was designed by practical necessity, refined across generations, and proven across climates that varied widely from one farm to the next. Your refrigerator is running right now, costing electricity every hour of every day, holding carrots that will go soft in 3 weeks. The sandbox costs nothing to build, nothing to run, and almost nothing to maintain. It keeps the same carrots firm for 6 months in any cool corner of your house. Farmers used it for 2,000 years, across every climate that produces root vegetables. It worked through every winter before electricity existed, through every winter before refrigerators were invented, through every winter before the food system was built around the assumption that cold storage should come from a machine that costs money every month it runs. It will work through every winter after you build it. The refrigerator industry replaced this method in 1 generation by selling you something that costs money to buy, money to run, and money to repair when it breaks. The sandbox has no motor, no compressor, no thermostat, no warranty, and no monthly operating cost. It is a box filled with sand. It has always been a box filled with sand. And the only reason you have probably never used one is that nobody who stood to profit from selling it to you ever had a reason to remind you that it existed. Why did we stop? We stopped because a business needed us to. Because a refrigerator generates monthly electricity revenue for a utility company, and a cold chain generates ongoing revenue for every company in it. The sandbox generates revenue for nobody. It requires nothing from anyone. It just works the way it always worked, the way it will always work, for anyone willing to fill a container with slightly damp sand and put it somewhere cool. The sandbox is still waiting. If you found this genuinely useful, watch the next video and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.